What makes many shonen series and honestly series in general to decline is the fact that they are repetitive. They just bring the same ideas that the creator had at the beginning and just repeat them through the entirety of the story just to keep a long running series alive. There is only two ways you can actually keep a long running series alive. One, you just don't. You just start a new series after the one is ended. Two, well, you're Hirohiko Araki. The best thing to ever happen to JoJo's Bizarre Adventures is Hirohiko Araki, because he is a goddamn genius. And the most genius thing he has done is arguably the fact that he has every JoJo part, well, like I said, every JoJo part. Dividing JoJo by parts is so smart and allowed the series to basically be infinite, because no matter what your preference is, in a way or another you will relate to something, and even if you dislike all of it, you will find something that you like, unless you like yourself. To have a series universally likable is really hard, and to achieve that, even that series has to have a lot of changes in between. That is why JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Part 5 changed everything. It's kinda a long story to explain, but I think it's time to start right here at the aesthetics. JoJo for the most part was known for the crazy outlook that it had. Whenever you like to accept it or not, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures is a bizarre adventures after all. And from the outside look, it's kinda weird, and that's what it makes it special. Because from part 1, Hirohiko Araki used a theme that is really interesting. The aesthetics changed through the parts drastically, going from part 3 to part 4, but the part that really redefined how change works for JoJo is part 5. Part 1 was Fist of the North Star look-alike, but also Araki stole Jesus. Part 2 was really like part 1, even Araki said I wanted to make the protagonist look really similar because I want my manga to be remembered even through parts. So that's it. But still, part 2 kinda has the really good start at the flamboyant look. I mean, really good compared to Jonathan, which in this picture, his head is like 5 inches and his body is like 20 meters. Part 3, even though it kept the muscular look, at the same time it added ghost fightings, quite literally, and that really redefined JoJo as well, because you will see later. Jotaro, even though he was really iconic, the most iconic design in all of JoJo, from the outside perspective, even though he's a 195 centimeters guy, all around badass, he still wasn't as muscular as Jonathan. But you can see this change in part 4 really, because in part 4, if you look at the first chapter of the manga compared to the last chapter of the manga, it's, oh my god. Araki really proves that you don't really need muscular dudes anymore, because we have stands, and also my style is way cooler now. So part 4 is really the start of this new change in JoJo. But when did it really switch up? At the end of part 4? But part 4 is nowhere comparable to part 5 in this. Oh my god. I wish you knew what I'm talking about. Part 5 is the starter camp for this kind of designs, I guess. It goes both ways, but I can't really argue anymore. Part 5 has some of the craziest character designs we ever seen in JoJo. Not crazy in the way they are designed in overall, but crazy in the way they dress, the way they pose, the way they breathe. Everything is crazy in part 5, and we all like it. Araki succeeded once again. When I first heard that JoJo's Bizarre Adventures part 5 is a mafia gang type thing, like Godfather, I was like, oh no, we're gonna have some of the suits designed, and oh my god, we're gonna see businessmen with mafia type thing just batting around with stats. Is gonna be like crazy. But I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong, because the experience I had reading some flamboyant guys that have holes in their pants fighting each other in Italy the way they do in part 5 is an experience that I won't change with anything ever. So yeah, the big art style difference changes in part 5. Even though the bizarre aspects are completely there, it only like improves, and the writing is like even better, which I will talk in the second and the third part of this video. There are still people who are confused about this. They are like, oh my god, flamboyant boys, where are the girls? Hi Trish. They say that JoJo after part 4 doesn't have good girls. Hi Jolene, and they're wrong. Just read part 8, oh my god. Anyways, the new art style that Hirohiko Araki developed made Araki and his manga to be considered as the best of one of the best in art, period. Every remake of the old characters design he did from the old parts are almost masterpieces of its own, and the art he did all the JoJo's together are amazing. They represent so much about JoJo and Araki's improvement through the years. And part 5 standalone created this new art style. With an Italian mafia background, Araki managed to fit so many iconic characters with so many character designs that are completely out of the ordinary, not just for JoJo but for manga in general, and became a fashion center for manga and the only manga to be featured into some of the best fashion collabs ever, which is crazy and amazing at the same time. It's worth saying that as for mafia, which have a big influence in the media in general, JoJo Part 5 was one of the first mangas to be that kind of genre for Japan, and maybe that is the reason why JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Part 5 is considered as one if not the best part in Japan. I mean, it's the most popular part, which is amazing. There are more reasons why JoJo Part 5 has this status that changed everything, and let's get into the writing. Hirohiko Araki in Part 3 and onward pushed the ideology of the Joestar family to be more indirect to it. By that I mean, Jotaro Kujo doesn't have the Joestar surname, because that's how it works in realistic world, and you can't have every single Joestar to be a Joestar in their surname. They just have to be a Joestar in their bloodline. The same goes to Josuke, but Giorno breaks this. He is Dio's son, and this is one of the biggest things about Part 5. Dio is one of the most iconic villains to anime history, and to have this kind of protagonist, it's not only unseen in manga, but unheard in manga, and this kind of changes the simple system of family bloodline in JoJo that it had through part 1, 2, 3, 4. Then what else changed JoJo in writing wise is the way that Araki writes villains and characters. Every single character from part 5 is really developed, and it has real deep concepts such as a backstory, a reason to be there, a reason to fight, and most of all, love for their teammates, love for their gang, or anything in between of that. That gives them way more personality than the characters that they have from part, and let's just say part 3, because they are really similar to part 5. Then every single villain is really well constructed, doesn't mean to be just a tool of the main villain, but it's more an own personality with their own goals into the story, which really changes the way JoJo parts have worked, especially for villainish, because part 4 didn't really have real villains, more just antagonists, if you can even consider them as that. The culture of Italy is a really complex culture. It's not something you just define in the simple words, even though we don't really get tradition to that, because part 5 takes place in a week or so in the real time of the part, but my point is that it had a lot of influence over it, because the backgrounds, the cities, everything is Italy-like, and what I call the best city backgrounds in every single part, besides the parts we're actually traveling. Part 3 we just see some deserts, but I'm mainly pointing to part 7 when we actually see better stuff. So yeah, GG to that part 5. Also, story-wise, part 5 has a lot of influence, and it changed the ways we see JoJo as a manga. From part 3, the biggest concept of JoJo, like I mentioned before, were stands. Stands are the most iconic power system of their time. I will argue that stands really define what JoJo is, because most of the JoJo characters are defined by their stands, especially in part 4 and 5. But my point goes even farther than that, because part 5 is the part which we learn where stands come from and how stands got introduced. We learn how Dio got the stand, and the connection link Hirohiko Araki thought between Diablo and Dio is perfect. And I will argue everything in between stands, like the meteor and everything that crashed to bring the stands into the world with the arrow and the requiem idea. Everything is perfectly put on the big will of Hirohiko Araki to create this big part of exposition into a part which doesn't follow the direct story of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Well, I consider part 1, 3, and 6 to follow the direct story, and part 2 to be the mask, part 4 to be the arrow, and part 5 to be the origin of the arrows. I think part 5 for their place the best part of all of them for their specific thing that they need to develop exposition on, and I really respect Hirohiko Araki for changing the way we see stands into one part, because this bits of exposition we get, like I said before, it's really important. It gives us a new way of thinking about stands. Also, it gives us some of the best powers ever that we like to call as Requiem stands. Even though we see 2 of them, it's just like we see a million of them, because oh my god, just the fan fictions we write about them are like endless. So I guess y'all get my point with this. Part 5 be iconic. Okay, that's pretty much everything I had to say about part 5 and how it changed JoJo, how redefined what a JoJo part is. And honestly, at this point I will argue that it redefined how a manga works, at least for Shonen Jump, because I won't say directly inspired, but I honestly will say that some of the Shonen Jump's mangas we get later on have kinda influence from part 5. Like, I have a Dream Giorno Giovanna, but that kinda sounds similar to me from some other mangas like 4 or 5 years later. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please turn the notifications on for the channel because YouTube is weird nowadays. Also, check out this fan art. This all fan art is like from people at my Discord server. If you want to join, talk to them, find new art in the description below, and you can follow them and just enjoy overall JoJo. Join my Discord server. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a nice one. Adinplore is signing out.